Ralph from Florida is on pronouns are he, him, who says he has evidence from quantum physics that suggests the existence of God. What's that mean, Ralph?
Hello.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Good. The reason I asked, I just stuck in my earphone, so making sure you can hear me. Yeah. I believe that the recent discoveries in quantum physics suggest the existence of God.
Not sure what you mean by suggest.
The existence of,
because I'm interested in someone demonstrating that there's sufficient evidence to warrant belief in a God, not just someone saying, I think quantum mechanics suggests a God, because people have said that about pretty much every scientific discipline that, now I know you're not, but so what exactly do you mean by suggests a God? Matter of fact, let's just give you your minute to go.
What I mean by that is that once a certain understanding of God is accepted, then what we find in some of the recent discoveries in quantum physics suggest that that entity exists.
Okay, well, that's good because you came in at like 30 seconds. So what you said was once a certain understanding of God is accepted, then we find in recent quantum physics findings suggest that entity exists. What is the certain understanding of God that somebody has to accept, and why would you have to accept it first?
Because it is different than the God that most people look at, the God of the Bible, or the God of the Quran.
Hang on, Ralph. That doesn't explain to me why you have to believe it first. So tell me what the specific understanding of God is that you're arguing for.
Okay. It's a definition of God, and so I've got to go through the characteristics and I'll explain them to you, and if you accept them, then we'll move forward.
That's what I asked you to do. I don't need a preamble of you telling me what you're going to do. I just need you to do it.
Okay. First, that God must be infinite. No beginning or no end. Because if there's a beginning or end to God, it just doesn't make sense that that's the case.
No.
God must be
now, Ralph, I got to stop you here. So first of all, I'm not convinced that an actual infinite is remotely possible. That would need to be demonstrated. And since infinity isn't a quantity, it's a concept. What you're suggesting, no beginning and no end, isn't even necessarily infinite. What it would be then is eternal, and perhaps arguing that it's outside of time. But when you define a characteristic of God, it doesn't do us any good for you to say, God must have this characteristic, otherwise it just doesn't make sense. That is not an argument. That is not a definition. That is basically saying, here's the only thing that I'll accept. So what is the reason that you think God must be infinite?
Because if God is not infinite, then there is let's see. If God is finite, then for me, that's not a God.
I don't care. See, here's the thing, Ralph. I'm not interested in people's esoteric personal definitions of God. Now, I'm interested in what you believe and why. So what I'm saying, when I say I'm not interested, I'm definitely interested. I would like you to be able to continue and make your point. But do you understand that what you personally accept is irrelevant to what is? Because how do you know there's not a God who's not infinite? And how do you know there's a God at all? And how do you know that the quality of a God is infinite? And if you have to see, you're basically saying quantum mechanics suggests a God once we have a certain understanding of a God. Well, that's putting the cart before the horse. See, you should be following the evidence where it goes rather than leading it where you want to go. If you begin with a conception of God, like, I think God is infinite. And hey, you know what? Infinite is a concept in mathematics, therefore God. You haven't demonstrated a thing other than that you don't understand. I don't know if Kenneth has anything to add.
My little notepad, I wrote in big letters, if, and then a little arrow to post hoc, because like what you're doing here, we could do this with anything, Ralph. We could say we're going to presuppose that God has a set of qualities, and then like read the Quran and go, oh, okay, this fits all of these things that I'd already made up my mind were so about God. Therefore, the Quran is true, and there's a God. Like, people do this. This is common. So, yeah, coming to the table saying, all right, God has to have, in my brain, a set of attributes, and then I can look at a body of information. It could be physics, it could be a book, it could be whatever, and then fitting the two things together, rationalizing them post hoc. That is not a way to arrive at true conclusions, my friend. So it's a good way to actually steer yourself wrong with, confirmation bias and all that.
Okay. Then I guess my argument is no longer valid.
It wasn't valid to begin with, but the issue was soundness. But yeah, go ahead.
Here's the thing that I'm saying. We're trying to say what God is and whether or not God exists. That's the topic of conversation. What I'm saying is, in order for us to do that, we've got to define what this God is that we're trying to prove exists. Right?
So, no, well, for anybody who's, hang on, Ralph. For anybody who's proposing a God, Kenneth and I, while we're on the show, we would like a definition of the God that we're talking about. We want to understand what it is that you're claiming exists, and then we can go on to why. But in the broader scheme of what you just said is like, in order for us to find a God, we must know what we're looking for. No, that's not true. Every instance of let's go out and find a God begins with, hey, we've thought of a God. Let's go see if we can find him. That is where you risk leading the evidence. What we should do instead is say, here's our observations about the universe. Let's follow the evidence to the conclusions we have. And when the evidence suggests that there may be some intelligent agent being that might qualify as some version of God, then you follow the evidence there. But if you never run across evidence in the universe that suggests there's something supernatural, that suggests there's some thinking, powerful, agenty thing that might be in the ballpark of what humanity is defined as a God, until that actually happens, there's no reason or justification to posit one in the first place. And we know that's true because nobody's sitting around trying to find evidence of invisible pink flying unicorns. Nobody's sitting here trying to find, hey, you know what? I had this idea that there are universe creating pixies. Let's go out and see what's consistent with that. Because if you were to make a list of what you're basically doing is you could have done this. You could have said, hey, I'm going to define God as really big, God as everywhere, and God as powerful. Hey, the universe is really big and the universe is everywhere. And there are billions of stars in the universe that are very, very powerful. That all suggests that there's a God. No, none of it suggests there's a God. You just created 3 equivocation fallacies to support it.
People do this with Bigfoot, right? That people will say that a Sasquatch has a certain set of attributes. All right, it's got the big feet, maybe it has long claws and stuff. And you can go in the forest and find big footprints and scratch marks on trees, and you can tell yourself, oh, this is all very consistent with a Bigfoot. How'd you rule out bears? How'd you rule out other creatures? But once you start with the set of assumptions and then try to reason your way back to a conclusion, man, you're in trouble. So it's a great way to chase Sasquatches, when you could be learning something real about the world.
Does that make sense, Ralph?
Yes, almost.
Okay. Almost, okay.
And they almost come with what you said kind of early on, Matt, about science, investigating and leading the evidence leading towards pointing to an intelligent corporal being, etc. What that sounds like is that you're letting science lead you to something that you consider a God to be. And what I'm saying is, what I want to do is set down the characteristics of that God up front.
What are the characteristics of that God, and how no, Ralph, real quick. What are the characteristics of the God, and how do you know that those characteristics are the actual characteristics of a God?
Well, it comes from something called intuitive reasoning that kind of
no. I don't care what you intuit. I am unimpressed with your intuitions, Ralph, and so should you. You should be very unimpressed with your intuitions. If in fact there is a God that we can then go out and find, either the evidence is going to point to it and then define what that God's characteristics are, or you will be able to give the characteristics of the God and give good reasons why those characteristics exist. Because when you say intuitive reasoning leads me to this definition of a God, you might as well say, I just pulled this definition of God right out of my ass.
Let me back up there, Matt. You just said your evidence is going to lead you to something that is a God.
No, I said
say that.
No, I didn't. I said, if you follow the evidence, you could theoretically, hypothetically, come up with a God. You could say, here's the evidence. It leads to this and this and this. And now we found that there is some entity that has these characteristics, and we're going to go ahead and say that that qualifies as a God. That would be following the evidence there. I did not say that the evidence would necessarily lead you to a God.
Okay. What kind of evidence would lead you to concluding that this is a God? Unless
I don't know
that what is a God? Like conclude that what is a God?
What a God is in the first place.
Why would we start from the assumption that there are gods in the first place?
That's what we've been telling you. If there's no reason, there's no justification for beginning with the assumption that there is a God or that you know anything about a God.
I'm sorry. Could you repeat that? I missed it. There's no reason.
There's no reason to begin with the assumption that there is a God or that you know anything about the characteristics of a God. Once upon a here, let me do this, Ralph. Once upon a time, we did not know. No, Ralph, listen. Once upon a time, we did not know about bacteria and viruses. They are too small to see with the naked eye. And so people thought that diseases resulted from demonic things, or in some cases, just bad air and things like that. Or we went through a whole bunch of different things to build up a case for understanding that there are, in fact, bacteria and viruses, and that these are foundational reasons why we suffer from disease and stuff. If we'd have begun with diseases caused by evil spirits, let's go find the evidence to prove that there are evil spirits. What we are doing there is poisoning the well. We're beginning with an assumption about what the cause is, when it turns out that is not the cause at all. We had no reason to assume that. And what you're doing and what other people have done with a God is say, I'm going to see if I can prove that there's a God. Why? If there is a God, tell him to fucking prove himself. You have no justification for thinking that a God exists any more than you think that there are evil spirits who cause disease. So until you can tell us what the characteristics of God are and how you know it, this is we're just wasting time.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, and the last thing you said, until I can tell you what the characteristics of God are and how I know it, what you're saying basically by those words is there's nothing I can say.
No, I'm saying, no, you don't know, Ralph. No, what I'm saying is tell me what you believe and why. And so far you've done nothing but say, my intuition leads me to believe that these are the characteristics of God. Well, none of us, including you, should care about that.
Well, and Matt's trying really hard to help you here, Ralph, with sort of reducing your set of assumptions that you bring to the table. Because, like with the example of evil spirits causing disease, when you bring these assumptions to the table, you're setting yourself up to be wrong. So if you reduce the assumptions that you're bringing to the table and just try your hardest to let the evidence guide you to your conclusion, put the God thing aside and just see where the evidence goes, man.
If it turns out there's evidence for God, you will find that.
Yeah.
Or, well,
okay.
I can't say you will find it, but that will be the truth has nothing to fear from inquiry, and the evidence points most reliably to the truth.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll ask one question, and after that, I think we're probably done, because I don't think what I'm trying to say is enough to convince you to continue our discussion.
Shouldn't be enough to convince you either, my friend. But yeah, what's your question?
No. If we are trying to define God, and I say one of the things God must be is infinite, and your response to that is, how do you know God is infinite? And my response is, if it's a God, it has to be.
The next question would be, well, how do you know that? Because you're just making assertions. A God's infinite. Well, how do you know? Well, it has to be. How do you know?
Why does it have to be infinite?
Because if it's finite, it's not God.
Okay, goodbye.
It's some entity.
No.
Okay?
No. That's called a tautology. It's called a circular argument. You can't say God must be infinite, because if it's not infinite, it's not God. You have told us absolutely nothing. Your entire sentence is void of any content at all, because A equals A equals A. It is a tautology, and it is a waste of time. Think about it some more, Ralph. We got to move on.
Yeah.
God must be this because that, otherwise he's not God.
Right. All Fergalburgles are necessarily blue, Matt. Otherwise.
I am the Lord of Fergalburgles. I therefore will agree with Kenneth. All Fergalburgles are blue. I tell you what, I was optimistic, but at the end, of course, Ralph went right back to the start, as if we hadn't said anything over the course of that call, and that's frustrating, because maybe there's somebody else may be able to come up with an example that explains it to Ralph in a way like that.